Ms. Susanna, if you would introduce our first presenter, and we will begin. Thank you. Ms. Susanna Malvo, RSVP.
Thank you, Hilton. I am very happy to be here. I recently started with SMILE as the RSVP project director, and that is retired as senior volunteer program. So really excited to be here, really excited to see so many people. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing the panelists for the first go round, which are going to be talking about the ALICE report. If you have not heard about the ALICE report, it is a major part of our series on poverty. So we have presenting the ALICE report is Dr. Jason Huffman, who is the Vice President of Organizational and Impact Strategies with United Way of Acadiana. He joined United Way staff in 2013. He earned a doctorate in mathematics from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Dr. Huffman leads a team responsible for all research, community program investments, and incubation of internal programs, along with accountability for their outcomes. He addresses performance issues related to outcomes and data submitted by funded partners through training and personalized assistance and direct corrective action as needed. If you'll welcome Dr. Huffman. And also joining Dr. Huffman is Ms. Valerie Bowles. She is the Research and Evaluation Manager with United Way of Acadiana. She has an MS from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. She plays an essential role in measuring the progress and results of United Way of Acadiana's initiatives and collaborations. Bowles joined United Way staff in 2014 and brings a decade of experience in managing grants and leading students to significant academic gains in the classroom. Please welcome Ms. Bowles. And at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jason.
Good morning. Good morning. Can y'all hear me? Is the mic working? Yeah. Okay, great. We've got a dual microphone system. We tested it beforehand, but with technology, you always have to make sure. Well, I'm so happy to be here this morning. Again, my name is Jason Huffman. I'm with United Way of Acadiana. As you probably noticed, myself and Valerie both very, very interested in data, because the data tells us so much about the reality. That plus the human stories that go along with it are integral to the work that we all share. And as I look around this room, I see so many of our partners in the community with SMILE, with United Way of Acadiana, with so many organizations that are doing the work that makes a difference for so many of our neighbors that need our assistance, need our help. So we're real excited to be here today. First, let me thank Brenda and Hilda and all the folks, Royal, everyone at SMILE, for inviting us to be a part of this conversation today. We're very, very happy to be here, very, very excited to partner with SMILE and so many of you in the room to do this wonderful work that we're blessed to be able to do. And we're here today to talk about the ALICE report. And before I get into any of the data, before I get into any of the details there, I want to introduce at a high level that concept. ALICE is an acronym. And we're following the lead. This concept was really pioneered by a United Way over in New Jersey. And now there's about 10 different states that have an ALICE report. We in Louisiana are part of the second or the third cohort to have a report like this produced. But ALICE is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. It's the heart, or I would argue that it's a big portion of what this entire series that SMILE is hosting. We're so glad that y'all are doing this, to talk about poverty, right? To talk about our neighbors who are in need. And so one of the things that we at United Way are very excited about is that this report, this ALICE report, is going, or has already begun to use the data to tell us a more complete, more comprehensive story about poverty. So you'll see us compare the federal poverty limit in just a few moments to the data and what we're learning about this ALICE population, asset limited, income constrained employed. So at a high level, you can kind of think of ALICE, even though it's a woman's name, ALICE really represents all of us. It represents folks throughout the community that we meet every single day. It's folks who work hard, but still struggle to make ends meet. Okay? They might not be below the federal poverty limit, all right? But they're still struggling to make ends meet. And so we all know lots of folks like that. We might meet them every single day. It might be someone who's caring for our children at a daycare center or at school. It might be someone who helps us get coffee in the morning, or who serves us at a restaurant when we get a meal. It might be someone who helps attend to our dry cleaning or other services that we get throughout the community. Every single day, we meet and interact with folks who struggle to make ends meet. And so that's one of the things that we're real excited about, is this report helps us get into the details of why that is and who that impacts. Okay? Because a lot of times we use phrases like the working poor, okay? Which helps us get maybe an intuitive sense of a population that we care deeply about. But the ALICE report helps us through the actual data specific to our communities, right here in Louisiana, right here in Lafayette Parish, and in St. Martin Parish, and in Iberia Parish. Which reminds me, I wanted to mention, I'm going to talk about the full collaboration here in a moment, but Corleen Ruley, who's the executive director of United Way of Iberia Parish, wanted to be here this morning. She was really planning and excited to be able to share some information about this collaboration, about this report, but had a very, very important meeting that came up at the last second. So just yesterday afternoon, she let me know that she wasn't going to be able to make it here this morning. But the partnership between the United Ways across Acadiana, including St. Landry Evangeline United Way, has really been such a valuable cooperative effort to get the word out about the ALICE report. And so Corleen extends her welcome to all of you, and is sorry that she couldn't be here in person to be a part of this discussion today. So I mentioned a collaboration because what you'll find in the ALICE report, and I do have a couple of the actual full reports here, so it's a big document, 250 plus pages. The good news is that, well, a couple good news is, you don't have to read the whole thing to get a sense of what's in there. We're going to help introduce some of the concepts this morning to kind of get a taste of what's there. But you also are, you can very easily get a copy of that full report lots of different places. UnitedWayOfAcadiana.org, our website, you can download a free copy. United Way of Iberia, Corleen's United Way, you can get a free copy on their website. Also, the State Association, LAUW, that's Louisiana Association of United Ways. If you go to their website, you can get a free copy. So there's lots of ways that you can get to this document, the full report. Because what we're going to be able to share with you today is really just a taste of the detailed depth of data that's available in that 250 plus page document. So we hope we intrigue you enough to go download that document and take a closer look. But it really was a collaboration of the United Ways across the state of Louisiana. We'll see some state level data in the presentation today. You'll see some numbers that are specific to Acadiana. But one important point to make is that one of the values of the report is that it does have data that's based on information available at the parish and the municipality level, and then you can go and find actual data about individual parishes throughout that report. Another thing worth noting is that this really wouldn't have been possible without the help of some important collaborators here. Intergy Corporation helped sponsor the production of the ALICE report, and they actually are serving on the National ALICE Advisory Board for us. And then JP Morgan Chase, who supports so much work in our communities that supports and helps the ALICE population, they also helped to sponsor the production of this report. So it really wouldn't have been possible without the collaboration of all those United Ways and Entergy and JP Morgan Chase. So, what's in this report? What's it all about? What are we trying to do? The first thing that I'll sort of, again, try to intrigue you and encourage you is to be part of the ALIS conversation. One of the things that we at United Way really feel strongly is valuable about the ALIS report is we're able to put a definition. So instead of using a phrase like working poor, and what does that mean? We all know every day that our agencies and our organizations, our programs, use things like 150% of the poverty level, 200% of the poverty level. Well, why is that? It's because we already know that there's a population out there who's above the poverty level and still has significant, sometimes extreme needs to be met. Right? So that's one of the values, or one of the real powers, I think, of this report, is to be able to put a definition to that and then use the actual data of what does that look like in Lafayette Parish? What does that look like in Iberia Parish? What does that look like in St. Martin Parish? Because it's not the same, right? Federal poverty limit might be the same in all three of those parishes, and in LA, and Chicago, and New York City. But the reality of the residents who live in those communities is not the same. The costs of affording a meal or housing or all the different things that it takes to make ends meet, to make a life. Those are not the same in New York and LA and Lafayette and St. Martinville, right? So that's, again, being able to get to the actual data is another thing that we think is so powerful. So we invite you and encourage you to help us spread the word about the ALIS report. Again, it's freely available at all those websites and more than that, to be quite honest. And so we want folks to be talking about ALIS. We want folks to know that that's available and that there's more information there that can help us move forward. You know, a couple things that I know are noted when Hilda was speaking a few minutes ago was that it really takes all of us, right? And that's one of the things that's very, very clear in the ALIS report. All right? We're going to see some numbers about how many households are ALIS. We're going to see some numbers about how much of a gap there is between ALIS and what we'd like to achieve. Right? It's pretty big, right? But let's not take that as discouraging. Let's take that as encouragement that working together, we can find solutions, right? Not one solution. It's not a matter of one policy change and this all goes away, right? Or one new program and everything's solved. We know that that's just not the case. But when we work together, when we collaborate, we can find things that do improve the situation for this, this large number of folks that we want to serve, we want to help, and can make our communities stronger, make our communities more sustainable. All right? So help us get the word out about ALIS. And we will next, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Valerie Bowles, and we're going to see a little bit more of the data that ALIS affects.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. Can you all hear me in the back? Great. So Jason gave you a really high-level view of who ALIS is. We now have a name for people who live above the federal poverty level but don't make enough money to make ends meet. We all know ALIS, right? We've all seen them. Maybe we've been ALIS before. What's really great about the report, and you all have a very condensed version in front of you, is that we have very specific numbers for what it costs to live in Louisiana and what it costs to live parish by parish. And so we're going to take a look at that. Just to give you a little bit of background, the ALIS budget is defined by five major buckets of costs, 5 major categories in a budget. And if you all think about how you spend your money every day, these buckets of costs probably make sense, right? And so the 5 categories in the ALIS budget are housing, childcare, food, transportation, and healthcare. We know that we spend money on other things, but these are the 5 major categories that define the ALIS threshold budget. And this is a survival budget, what you need to survive every day living in Louisiana. The budget does include 10% for miscellaneous costs, and it does include money for taxes. However, there are a lot of things that the ALIS threshold budget does not include. Again, we know we spend money on these things every day, but folks who fall under that ALIS line have to make some tough choices because the ALIS budget does not include cell phones, cable TV, eating out ever, not even once a month. It doesn't include money for diapers or formula if you have small children. And also haircuts, birthday gifts, all of that has to be absorbed in that 10% miscellaneous cost. And most importantly, the ALIS budget does not include savings. So we know that ALIS lives paycheck to paycheck because they don't have a savings account, and they're often one emergency away from falling into a financial crisis. And so that emergency could be an emergency room visit because their son broke his arm. Or it could be flat tires or a broken refrigerator. Because there's no savings, those are some really tough choices that ALIS families have to make every day. So let's take a look at what it costs to live in Louisiana. This is the average cost for the entire state of Louisiana. We're going to talk about parishes in just a few minutes. But we can see that for an individual in the state of Louisiana, to make ends meet, bare minimum survival budget, an individual needs to make at least $17,000 a year. The federal poverty limit, many of you know from your work and your agencies, is right around $11,000 a year. A family of 4, this is 2 adults, 1 infant, and 1 toddler, needs to make a minimum of $42,000 a year to make ends meet in the state of Louisiana. You'll see these 5 budget categories that we introduced just a moment ago, and then the costs associated with each. So let's take a look at one of those. For housing, for a single adult, you guys can kind of see that. The budget allows for $517 a month for housing, and this is an efficiency 1-bedroom apartment. For a family of 4, the budget allows for $713 a month. This is a 2-bedroom apartment. And so we often get questions about, where are those apartments? Right? Where is the $700 apartment in any of our communities? And so we can get into this a little more later, but I just want to say that these are numbers that were actually reported to the federal government in 2013. That's the most recent year that we have data available. And so this is what people were actually paying. That doesn't mean that those apartments are available. Maybe they've been there for years and years and years and the price didn't increase, and there's some other pieces that contribute to those prices. But the take-home message here is that this is a bare minimum budget of what families need to survive. That's the first take-home. The second take-home is it's quite a bit higher than the federal poverty limit, right? And so we know that these families and individuals, I gotta hold this better, I'm sorry. The families and individuals who make below the ALIS threshold, they're still struggling. They're still making some tough choices every day. So let's compare that really briefly to the federal poverty limit. The light blue line on the bottom represents the federal poverty limit, and the dark blue line at the top represents ALIS. The federal poverty limit includes a certain amount for each head in a house. And so, if you have 2 adults or if you have 1 adult and 1 child, the limit is exactly the same regardless of whether or not it's adult or a child, or if you have 2 adults and 2 children, or 1 adult and 3 children, there's still 4 heads. And so that line is pretty constant. And since 1982, the amount that's added per person to the federal poverty limit has not changed. Wow. It's right around $8,000 per person that's added. What's really great about ALIS is it gives us a more nuanced view of what it actually costs. And so we can see that this line adjusts depending on whether you have adults or children in your household and the actual cost for what you need to survive. Again, these are numbers for the state of Louisiana averages. So let's look at that state budget a little bit deeper. So we know that a single adult needs to make at least $17,000 a year to make ends meet. That equals about $8.65 an hour if you're working 40 hours a week. For a family of 4, that $42,000 we introduced earlier is a combined household budget. So the two adults in that house combined need to make about $42,000 a year or $21 an hour. So for example, maybe one parent, one adult is earning $8 an hour and another one is earning $11 an hour. There's lots of ways that we could break that down, but that's just an example of to make ends meet in Louisiana. When we compare that to what jobs actually exist, we see a little bit of a disconnect. I heard lots of agreement there. So this is a view of the jobs that actually existed, again in 2013. And what we see is that an overwhelming majority, 71% of the jobs were under $20 an hour. And so if there's a family of 4 with 1 adult working, that $20 an hour might not be enough, probably is not enough to help the family afford the basic necessities. Also important to note is that there were 400,000 jobs that paid less than $10 an hour. And so again, we're seeing that we know what it takes to survive, and then we see the jobs that are available. We've all heard about the federal poverty limit, and we know that in Louisiana, only 19%, that's still 1 in 5 households fall under the federal poverty limit. But when we add the number of ALIS households, we add an additional 21%. So 19 plus 21, we know that 40% of families can be considered ALIS in our households, in our neighborhoods, in our communities across Louisiana. This is a heat map that's included in the full report. The darker the colors, the higher the percentage of ALIS households. The lighter the colors, the lower percentage. And so we see some parishes in the northern part of Louisiana where there's an extremely high percent of ALIS households. When we look at Lafayette Parish, we see that the coloring there is a little bit lighter. And so the average overall percent of households in Lafayette Parish is a little bit less than our neighboring parishes. But what's worth noting is that we now know information about what the report calls neighborhoods. And so there are neighborhoods within Lafayette Parish where that coloring might be a little bit higher. So for example, the downtown area in Lafayette, right where the Smile office is located, has a 62% ALIS population. And so even though overall, Lafayette looks not so bad, we know that there are pockets, there are pockets, of neighborhoods within the parishes where those distributions of ALIS look a little bit different. And the full report has tables by precinct and by neighborhoods where you can dig a little bit deeper. So we looked briefly at the ALIS threshold survival budget for the state, but we also have a page for each parish. And the report that you guys have in front of you, that little condensed report, has parish pages for Lafayette, Iberia, and St. Martin Parish. We pulled them out of the full report and included them here. And so you can see what it actually costs to live in those 3 parishes. And the parish pages also have, in the upper corner, towns, and towns are defined by the U.S. Census, so it might be a little bit different than what we consider towns. But it has a town view, so you can see the percent of households in each of those towns that fall below the ALIS threshold. In a little bit, Jason's going to introduce this economic viability index, but so just know that that exists for each parish, and we can get a better understanding of what our communities look like. I'm going to hand it back over to Jason, and he will dig deep into who ALIS is.
Oh yeah, they don't work together.
That's a small thing.
Turn that one off.
Sorry, I jumped the gun on that a little bit. Technology. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
So, as we see, the numbers are pretty striking, right? But as I watch your faces, you're not surprised, right? You know Alice. You know Alice is there. You know Alice each and every day. It's folks that we work with. It's folks that we are neighbors with. It's folks we serve. One of the things that, again, we're just so excited about the opportunity here, because we don't have all the solutions yet. We don't expect to have all the solutions yet. But we're excited to have the actual data, right? That's part of what Valerie was showing you just a moment ago, is that this is no longer a question of, it might cost, or wages might be a little bit lower in Louisiana, but it doesn't cost as much to live here as it does in LA or Chicago or somewhere. Well, that's fine and good, and that statement in and of itself is true, but the costs calculated in the Alice report come from the actual spending, right? So those, again, those housing prices, actually from HUD data, right? From actual spending right here in our communities. So we're trying, or we see an opportunity is probably the better way to phrase it. We see an opportunity to turn that conversation a little bit so we're not relying on assumptions. We're not relying on vague statements. We can get away from something like, oh, well, do we really need such and such policy? Those people aren't trying. Right? Those folks are not you're doing their part. Well, we can get to the actual data and say, look at this. That's not quite true. Okay? So real power in having that data at our fingertips. And that's kind of these next couple slides, is to talk about who Alice is. And as we saw on one of the slides Valerie shared with you, Alice doesn't discriminate geographically. Even in Iberia Parish, where we're lower than the state average, right? It's 40% Alice and below across the state. For Lafayette Parish, it's lower than that. But parts of Lafayette Parish, 2 out of 3 households. 2 out of 3 households aren't even making enough to pay the absolute minimum basics. No cable, no cell phone, no eating out ever, right? And as you all are well aware, those tough choices usually don't amount to, I'm going to follow everything on this side of the budget and not do anything over there, right? Alice will often have a cell phone. Alice might have cable TV. Alice might eat out. So that kind of demonstrates the pressure that it puts on those other categories. And it's not too surprising to see when we get to the end of the month why Alice can't pay the light bill, or when something comes up with the car or the refrigerator, that really puts intense pressure on that family getting by. Well, Alice doesn't discriminate geographically. Alice doesn't discriminate in any other way. So this slide is from the full report. It shows ethnic and racial breakdown of the Alice population. And as you see, just like with poverty and just like with the entire population, we've got almost the same percentages by the racial and ethnic breakdown there. The majority of the Alice households are white-led households, right? Just like, again, the entire population. When it comes to age, right? Same thing. When it comes to gender, right? I mentioned that before. Alice is a woman's name, but it's about 50-50 split. Alice male, Alice female. Comes the same way when we talk about age. So this, you see poverty is the darkest shaded region at the bottom of those bars, and then Alice is in the middle, and then above Alice toward the top. The one thing you'll notice is that it is a little bit higher than the general population for 25 and under. Just want to clarify, that's not children, okay? Those are folks who are filing an IRS tax return as head of household and age 25 and under. So not too surprising that the percentages are a little bit higher for that age group right at the very beginning of whatever their careers are. But then what you see beyond there is, again, pretty well corresponding to the general population, whether you're 25 to 44 or older than that. So Alice does not discriminate. It affects us all. But here is a point that often gets policymakers' attention, is that Alice votes. This is data from the 2014, the last kind of big national election, U.S. Senate election in 2014. And you'll notice the biggest voting block here, 41% of folks who actually turned out to the polls, 50,000, well, 49,000 and below. Okay? So essentially a large majority of Alice and poverty showing up to the polls. So again, getting that conversation to the actual data, the actual facts. Right? We need to pay attention to these things when we're having discussions about such and such a policy, right? Such and such a program. We can now turn to some of this information and have more data at our fingertips. Here's a list of some of the largest metro areas across the state, and you'll see the number of households and the percentage of households that are Alice and below. I think the point that I really like to make when I look at this slide is kind of like what we were talking about with Lafayette Parish. Yeah, Lafayette Parish is below the state average in terms of Alice and below. When you look at these cities here, you see Homa. There it is. Homa is 35% Alice and below. That's below the state average. Metairie, Lafayette. Okay, so that's a little bit better than average. That's good. But then let's also look at that middle column, right? 48,000 households, Alice and below. That's not just real people, that's a lot of real people, right? A lot of people who are struggling, because again, that Alice threshold, just being above, I guess that's maybe another point to make. We talk a lot about how if you're just above poverty and now you're defined as Alice, you're still struggling. Let's face it, if you're making $24,000 in your family of 4, well, technically you're above the Alice threshold, but you're still likely struggling, right? So again, just the kind of the numbers and the size of our neighbors, right? Our friends, our neighbors, and our citizens across the communities in Louisiana who are struggling to make ends meet, those are substantial figures. This is probably another important slide to kind of put into context the idea that there's not a single solution. So what this pie chart represents, and it's a little bit, there's more context in the full report, but what this represents is if we took all the residents, all the households across Louisiana, and we're somehow able to snap our fingers and say, this is what it would take for everyone to be Alice or above. Okay, this is how much resources it would take. And then what we compare that to is the actual dollars that are being put into our communities from actual earned income, right? Actual wages being paid. And then from the work of folks like us across this room here, nonprofits, right? Also government programs, things like food stamps and TANF and Social Security, right? So government programs, cash public assistance and whatnot. And then healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid. If you take all of those resources, all of those dollars that are actually invested, we still have an unfilled gap. We still would not meet that threshold of what it would take for everyone across the state to be Alice or above. And so again, I'm not saying this to be discouraging. I say this to be encouraging. And to really drive home that point that it takes us working together. It takes us working across sectors. That's what really jumps out to me when I look at this pie chart, because think of the good work that we do every day in nonprofits with those government programs and things like food stamps and whatnot. But look at the percentages here, 5%, 5%, 4%. If you add those up, just coincidentally, it matches the 14. One way to think of that is that if we doubled what we were doing right now, if we doubled everything we were doing, every last dollar that we're investing in nonprofit, every last dollar that we're offering in food stamps, if we double that, we would just barely make it to that threshold of everybody just making ends meet. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's something that we have to do together. We have to go across sectors. We have to collaborate. Public sector, all right? Policymakers, nonprofits, private funders, right? Foundations and private funders, corporations need to be a part of this conversation. Valerie alluded to the economic viability dashboard, and again, another thing that we're excited about that's in the report is kind of getting under the hood as to how does this look in one town versus another, in one parish versus another. And so again, for your brief handouts that we brought today, you'll see some information about Iberia Parish, Lafayette Parish, St. Martin Parish. But just to give you a sense of where this index comes from, again, it's actual resources, actual dollars that are either invested or available across a number of different factors. So the Housing Affordability Index compares things like affordable housing stock, right? What's actually available, and also the housing burden. So what that means is what's the percentage of your monthly resources, right, your monthly income that has to be devoted to housing, okay? As you're probably well aware, lenders take that into account when you're applying for a mortgage. And so we know that when that percentage is too high, we can sometimes be at risk for one event, one kind of financial crisis, creating a situation of homelessness. Job Opportunities Index takes into account things like the unemployment rate, again, from one municipality to another, one parish to another, and the actual wages for new recent hires, all right? So not just all the wages that are offered across every job in the state. But what about those new hires? What are the opportunities right now as folks are out there seeking employment? Then the Community Resources Index includes some of those things we were just looking at on the previous slide. The work that we all are doing to put resources back into the community, or in addition to things like what families have access to high-quality childcare, right? What's the percentage of homes that have access to childcare? What are some of the health resources? How many people have health insurance? And then things like social capital. Again, what are the resources that are being invested by nonprofits, by community action agencies like Smile and others to help help create solutions for those communities. So again, here's just a little bit of a snapshot of the parishes that Smile serves, and then some of the others in Acadiana. In the full report, we've got every single parish for the whole state. But a couple things probably resonate when you look at this chart. One thing that I notice is, say, Lafayette Parish, where the Job Opportunities Index is good, and the Community Resources Index is good. I mean, there's a lot of things that are available here in Lafayette. But look at this. The housing affordability is about as low as it can get, right? I mean, taking into those factors, it's not that the prices are the highest anywhere here, but when you compare the affordable housing stock to what it actually costs. Interestingly enough, and our folks in St. Martin be somewhat proud here, that St. Martin is one of the only parishes across Acadiana where there's a good rating on all three of those indices.
A lot of land.
So different challenges for different communities, okay? All right, it's not one story. It's not one story for the whole state of Louisiana, certainly not one story for the whole country, and it's not even one story for one parish. So inside a parish, you'll see some variability between where housing is more affordable versus not, where job opportunities are more readily available versus not, okay? So being able to get in and see that actual data can be very, very powerful for the conversation. So what's next? Well, we're part of it, right? The work that we're doing each and every day is helping us, but we know we need to do more. One of the things, like I said at the beginning, we encourage you all to help be a part of that conversation. Help us get the word out that this report is available. It's for free, right? You can download it again. UnitedWayOfAcadiana.org, United Way of Iberia has it on their website, LAUW.org. Those are three places, and then there's a dozen more that you can download a free copy. But help us get the word out that this exists, right? We have this data at our fingertips now, and that can help us change the conversation. Because when we have better data, right, when we have more information, we can have more enriched discussions, right? Maybe more productive discussions, maybe even more informed discussions with a policymaker or in the design of programs. Okay, so we at United Ways across the state really see that as an opportunity. All right, so all in all, we hope that we're bringing you an encouraging message, a positive message, that having this can change the game. Right? It's a tough game, there's no doubt about it, but it can change the game so that we can continue to make more and more progress and help more and more folks across our communities. So, with that, we'll transition, and I'll thank you for your attention, but we want to know, what kind of questions do you all have about us? Or about the Atlas Report?
And I don't need the microphone.
I really don't.
Because you're going to answer the questions. Any questions that you would have, if you could maybe raise your hands or stand and just fire your question out. I know you have, yeah.
Mr. Russo.
Mr. Broussard.
To every question there's an answer. The answer to that, do we raise the wages to lower the profit? As the answer.
So that's a great question. It was about wages.
For
the questions. Good. So I wish it were that simple. And I will certainly say, as you raise wages, that helps improve the situation for Alice and beyond. But one of the things that definitely jumps out to me, and as I have more and more of these conversations across our communities here in South Louisiana, it's fairly clear that that's not one solution that would solve the whole problem. And kind of that pie chart that we saw a moment ago drives that home for me about the number of resources it would take just to get to the ALIS threshold. So don't get me wrong. If there are any employers here, anyone watching, anybody who sees this and is motivated to take action on the wages side, please do. But when I read this report, I also recognize that that alone probably is not our solution. It's going to take a multifaceted, multi-layered approach.
Any income that would be $11,000 per se, would that be in the poverty level?
Yes, sir. Yes. So yeah, the question was income of 11,000. Would that be in the poverty level, even for a household of one? But then certainly, as you continue to add people to that household, that's more and more true. Okay, more and more true.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that Louisiana is changing more to a service state, trying to diverse from the oil field, because all these businesses coming into Lafayette is fine and dandy, but the job really not paying?
Fantastic question. So one of the things you'll find in the full report is actual data to that point, right? Corporations are coming to Louisiana, more jobs are being created, but by and large, it's kind of that slide that Valerie showed you where 70% of the jobs were $20 and below. In the full report, they cut that down into individual job sectors. So which professions are paying what? And so when you look at the multitude, or the most populous, if you will, job categories available, there's only a couple of them that will put you ALIS and above. Right? Like a registered nurse is one, but most of the other ones kind of near the top, the most readily available.
Right here, if you would stand so we could capture your question.
I'm wondering if the ALIS report includes a database that shows the providers of housing and where those particular providers fall within the spectrum of whether they are charging above or below the amount of rent and where it falls within the ALIS report.
Thank you, Joyce, for your question.
Good. So great question. Unfortunately, no. It probably would have been 3,000 pages rather than 300 if we'd gone to that level of detail. But what happens, so essentially all those providers will report their statistics either to the FDA or HUD or the IRS and all these publicly available resources, but then that's what we're drawing from. So what you'll see in the report is an aggregate, and it might be just for one municipality or even a section, as Valerie mentioned, might be one neighborhood inside that parish, but it is aggregated at that point.
Vanessa?
If I'm understanding, are you saying that the jobs that are like under $15 are outpacing the higher paying jobs?
Yes. Yeah. So again, the most populous, and do we have that? We might have an extra slide other way. The full report has more detail. We might have one slide here that shows just the snippet. Yeah, there it is. So the most available job opportunities, so 70,000 cashiers, 60,000 retail sales, 40,000 registered nurses. So that is one. You'll see it's kind of shaded in a different color there because that does put you above the ALIS threshold. But most of these, right? Waiters, waitresses, office clerks, secretaries, laborers. And again, in the full report, much more detail beyond just these categories.
Any other questions? Okay, Ms. Brenda,
Jason,
and then Lori.
going back to raising the wages, as an employer, I totally agree that if we have enough resources, we will be glad to raise our employees because our employees are very important to us. But what we have been finding too is that skilled labor, we also have to go out there to develop a pool of skilled labor because there are some jobs or employment opportunities for skilled labor such as welders or anything, I don't want to say it's a dying breed out there. But one of the things I think we need to focus on is building a community that embraces entrepreneurship and skilled labor. And I think that will assist us in moving forward in a good direction. And another thing that I want to make a comment too, and we appreciate the ALIS report, that is that we see every day homelessness. And I know that that's a data is not being captured. We see it growing and shifting every day. And so when we look at also the ALIS report and the working poor, we also have to remind ourselves there is a population out there that's not even included, not inclusive. And we have to always keep that in mind, that we have to also reach that population.
Great point.
That was a
Couple
comment.
of great points there. Really appreciate
We
it.
have Fernand. Yes.
Good morning. Question I have in relationship to ALIS is educational attainment. Does ALIS go into educational attainment as it relates to what education levels are for those individuals who are ALIS or not?
So yes, a little bit, kind of touching on Brenda's point too there. And of course, we've probably seen some of those statistics about the difference it can make just having the high school diploma or the GED, having a college degree, having a certification at the post-secondary level. So there is some of that in the report, definitely to that point. You kind of see it on this chart right here, that education, diploma, certification, and whatnot puts you that much closer to a point of financial stability. We hear that all the time in the public conversations.
Fernando, mi pregunta tiene. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is the reason that I invite the people to learn Spanish. The Latino community is here, and it's good to, in the same way the Latino community learn English, the American people learn Spanish, and we breaking down some stereotypes barrier. But my question has to be in the same way like Mr. here asking you. The relationship between poverty and education level, because this is exactly the point so far it's in the discussion in all levels in the country. How the poor family can break in the barrier and getting a minimal increase in rates, and the children in our community can go to college or any kind of education, like allow it to getting more money for his job. This is my question because it's the concern to the Latino community.
Sure. Muchas gracias para la pregunta. What Fernando brings up is such an important point, and again, following Royal's question, is that education plays such a key role here, right? Again, such an important factor. We were very, very proud that several members of the higher education community were part of the board of advisors that put together this report, including, and now I'm going to draw a blank on his name, but Valerie can help me out by looking. Monty Sullivan, okay, I remember. Monty Sullivan, who's the director of the statewide two-year colleges, right? The community colleges and technical college system for the state of Louisiana, served on that board. So a lot of good conversations in producing this report, a lot of good discussion that you wouldn't be surprised matches up perfectly with this. When we're out having a town hall meeting or a community conversation about financial strain, financial stress, financial stability, what we hear time and time again is that question of education. So I'll point out that
Ms. Hayes has a question, and then.
Oh, sure. But just to kind of drive home that point, kind of going back to Mr. Bouchard's question, right? Is it just wages? Well, yes and no. It's complicated, right? It's complex. Is it just education? Well, yes and no. That's an essential component, but it's not the only thing. Is it job opportunities? Yes and no, right? They're all so integrally related. And that's one of the things I love about this report is it digs in. When you go through, 250 pages, but there's a lot of narrative that really digs in on those key points and how they impact each other. So the more and more that you can help us kind of keep that conversation going, we really appreciate it.
Ms. Hayes?
I would just like to input based upon your ALIS population and research. Through Southern University and at one point LSU, we were doing IDAs that talked about the community stabilization through the economy, through the employment, and all through work training. And what we found is that even if we promoted education from the standpoint of having them to get a better certification, another degree, they were laden with the debt that locked them out of the opportunities to become a homeowner that led to increase for them to get stable housing. And so one thing that I feel is not represented there is substandard housing. Because it's not being input and they're paying far beyond the 518 to live in something that is uninhabitable.
That's right.
And so when I look at it, we want to prepare them to get schooled and educated to become these different aspects. And they're still falling in that wage that doesn't break the barrier of $12. I've seen people with degrees, masters, barely getting $15 because we have to move out of the state. And so the passion comes in at how do we change the behavior? How do we begin to get them to focus on what is really important? I don't mind you having cable, but if you have cable, you're going to be cutting out other things. And so maybe you don't need to be with, and I'm not an AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon hater, but maybe you need to be on a prepaid phone system. And so you get locked into something for 2 years that you can't dictate your livelihood from day to day. That's my comment, and I hope it can be used.
Preach, sisters, preach. Yes. Valerie had it.
The passion.
Yes.
So you know what? We're in the right spot. Right?
Yes.
And we're together for not only a real reason, but the right reason.
That's right.
Because it takes us working together to get to that point where we're finding real solutions.
Yes, my question comes from about the wages, as far as salaries going up. Is it true, just admit that I heard that wages goes up, cost of living goes up?
Of course. Somebody got to pay for it.
That's a good question. I'll be the first to admit I don't have the answer to that. I'm afraid. I don't know that the answer to that is fully in the report either. I mean, because that is a complex economic, kind of a macroeconomic question, an important one. But again, shows how closely these different issues are related to each other. You make a change in one arena, and it will impact those other ones.
That's right.
You make a choice in one arena of your budget, and it's going to impact those other ones.
We have 2 more questions. Reverend Johnson.
Do this data picks up, going back to what she was saying, because I know a lot of kids that degrees, even my children has degrees and can't find jobs. One just joined the military. And all these service industry are mostly college students with degrees, working 2 or 3 jobs. Are y'all able to grab that data? Because what happens, we tell our kids to go to school, but they accumulate all this debt and they can't find jobs. And going back to Sister Brenda's thing, we got to tell them to do skilled labor because you can make $150,000 a year being an electrician. And a lot of people don't know that. But does this get all of that data?
So it does. Again, at a macro level, what you see in the report is the number of jobs that actually exist right here, right now, right? It takes into account the actual wages of new hires, right? Not just folks that have been in their industries for 25, 30 years plus, but new hires. So it doesn't come up with the solution to all the questions. Let me not overpromise what's in the report, but there's so much there that it's going to help us have a much, much more informed conversation about those tough questions.
Let me tell you something. This is something national-wide. This is what is Houston so far today, May 5th, what the Latino community is doing about.
So you showed me a picture. It says, raise our wages so we can raise our kids.
All right.
This is the
Latino
community. Thank you all.
This is Valerie and okay.
And it's also the
Thank you so much for all the questions. And what's really apparent to me is, 1, you get it, and 2, that this really is a collective work system that needs to happen. And so we talked a lot about what are the inputs that could change this, what are the sources? Is it raising wages? Is it education? But I also want to encourage you to think about those 5 budget categories. not only where can we increase income, but where can we help families in one or more of those 5 budget categories. So maybe it's if a family has childcare that's affordable, then those other 4 categories can be better balanced. Or if an employer can help in some way with transportation, then those other 4 categories can be better balanced. And just keep in mind, we're not the first state that has this report, and so we have other states to look at. In Michigan, for example, there were employers that offered childcare at work, and there were employers who helped with transportation. They understood that their employees were missing work because their kids were sick, whatever. So I encourage you to think about both sources of input of income and how we can help raise that income level. But what are the things that people are spending money on, and how can we collectively help in one or more of those 5 categories?
Great. Okay, Mr. Jason.
Well, thank you all for such a wonderful time here today. Thank you for a great discussion. Let's keep the conversation going forward on Alice. So thank you.
I held all my questions. I'm just kidding. We'll talk again. But the conversation that's in here, it begins here. The conversation will continue. The solutions to all of those things will continue. We provide those budget classes. There's entities in here that provides those classes on budgeting, provide counseling and education. So we need to utilize that, but we need to tell our story and let people know that we provide this and it is necessary. I want to say that we're going to ask us to give the United Way of Acadiana, the United Way of Iberia in its absence, but all of the program that put the Alice report together. We thank you for collaborating with SMILE and bringing awareness to our community. That's what it's all about. So we're going to come and give you something that you can keep, Mrs. Allen.